Welcome and step into the minds of addiction and recovery. Hello, I'm your host, Brett C. It is an honor to bring into light one of the darkest aspects of our society, addiction. With 20 years of active addiction and 20 years of sobriety, I hope to bring together all listeners on a journey of inspiration and education. With my co-hosts Jared F. and Rich J., we will be sharing our experience, strength, and hope for all listeners to enjoy and have fun with. Now, F3 Recovery brings you the Super Sober Podcast.
All right, welcome to episode 21 of the Super Sober Podcast. Thanks for tuning in and being a part of the journey here. It's hard to even believe we're on podcast 21 now. Hope you checked out the last one on 20 with Cliff M's story and surviving the opiate epidemic. But we got another awesome guest here on podcast 21. We're with Mike G. I just wanted to start off here for the fans and everything out there. We just appreciate all the support and the feedback so far. So we're just going to keep on keeping on. I just want to let you know my name is Brett C. I'm your host. My sobriety date is 4/21/03. I'm an RN with a BSN. Been working in hospitals for up to 18 years. Been working in chemical dependency, helping people suss out this unbelievable convoluted disease, addiction. And we'll be going to our right, introducing our guest, Mike G.
Hi, thank you for having me, Brett. My name is Mike Griffin. I've been here. My sobriety date is October 16th, 2022. Really happy to be on the podcast. Thanks again for having me. I work for Goodwill of Orange County. I've been with them for a little over 14 years now. And good to be here.
Awesome. So you guys got to buckle up for this one. When you go to meetings and stuff and you hear people share and you hear Mike share and you're like, oh, yeah, you start shaking your head. And I was talking with the wife and I'm like, oh man, we got to get this dude on the podcast. He's all, yeah. So here we are. And it was a short notice too. So thank you for the short notice. Thanks for kicking it in. We're going to be doing a video later with him doing some talent show. He does comedy. He's in the recovery community helping people. He was helping people on the way over here. Man, it's going to be awesome. So stay tuned. But first, we're going to do a little business here. If you need any help in any way with your chemical dependency, substance abuse issues, mental health, you can go ahead and call His House New Creation. And that's with the podcast number 12. If you want to meet the owner, that's Glenn S. Coming up on 33 years of sobriety. And just call this number. They will help you out. They're open 24 hours. That's 877-345-4138. That number again is 877-345-4138. Just hang tight for a second. We're going to go to a quick little advertisement for His House New Creation, and we'll be right back.
Welcome to the place where it all began, the 9th Street House. Our maiden journey into hope and recovery for His House New Creation treatment centers since 1994. Right next door, the 9th Street apartment building stands as a testament to our commitment to providing comfortable and safe spaces for recovery. And on the other side, nestled amidst nature's best, our Palm House offers a tranquil haven to begin the path to sobriety. You'll find 12 unique His House New Creation treatment centers across Southern California. Just as recovery encompasses inner and outer transformation, our facilities mirror this philosophy. The external beauty of our homes reflect the nurturing and healing environments you'll discover within. These are just glimpses of the harmonious spaces where we support your journey to recovery. Our state-licensed and highly accredited programs echo this sentiment. We know that successful addiction treatment is more than skin deep. It requires a robust plan that heals the mind, strengthens the body, and nourishes the soul. We select the best facility to cater to your unique needs, providing focused, compassionate care that sets you firmly on the path to sobriety and hope. Welcome to His House New Creation Treatment Centers, where the journey to a healthier you begins. Your recovery begins here with us.
All right. Thanks for taking a second to listen to Glenn's platform out there and the treatment center. He's been helping the community out for over 30 years. You want to send your loved one or anybody that needs help. And if they can't help you directly, they will refer and direct to someplace in your community or wherever you are. We are here to help. We have the resources, we have the ability, and we've been doing it for a long time. So let's just get right into it here with Mike G. He's got a great story. Been getting to know him over the last couple of years, been going to meetings. I think we've probably been going to meetings together on and off at different clubs, throughout the years and
Oh, yeah.
stuff. But my ear's been perking up with him. And I know he's been working with Johnny too, right? Doing some comedy stuff with them and
Yeah.
stuff too. And Mr. Johnny F out there, shout out to him. We'll get him on here too with all the comedy stuff that he does to help out people. But enough about him. We're going to get into Mike G. So you got 2 years sobriety now, and alluding to a little bit later, also, this wasn't his first sobriety date too. So stay tuned for some good education on how to keep coming back, about how to get humble and then start over again and all that. So why don't we just start from the beginning, Mike? And give us a little bit of your history, and then we'll go into some other stuff and your spoken word about halfway through it. And what do
Yeah,
you think?
absolutely. Well, I was born I was raised in Ventura County. My
Oh,
father was a career criminal, and
oh.
he never had a job. I always wanted to be like him. As I saw when I was growing up, I'd see things like Leave It to Beaver, and I didn't like dream of being, little Beaver guy. But I saw movies like Scarface,
Mhm.
and that was appealing to me. My dad was a criminal, and I really looked up to him, and he was kind of a hero in a sense, doing whatever he had to do to take care of his family. At least that's how I viewed it, and I didn't have the heart for it. I remember he told me one time, the worst thing you can be in this world is a rat. And he
Mm.
took me out when the first time he taught me how to use a shotgun. He took me out to a field, and I blew away all my sister's old toys, or these toy babies. And I came back, and shortly after, me and my sister got into a fight. And the first thing out of my mouth is, "Oh yeah, we blew away all your babies." And I remember my dad finding out and being super disappointed, like, "Man, how could you rat us out?" And
Oh, failed the
uh,
first test.
yeah, I failed the first test. I killed a lizard with a knife and was like devastated. I came home and he was like, "What happened to the knife I gave you?" I said, "I killed a lizard and threw it away." I was just in tears. So I knew early on that I wasn't going to be able to be like him. The first time I got loaded was at the Man's Chinese Theater in the premiere viewing of Star Wars.
Oh yeah,
I
I remember
remember
that. That was a big deal.
taking a hit off a joint with my dad and his friend Spaceman. And
And
I was
how
only
old
I,
were you?
I was 7 years old,
Oh,
and I remember
whew.
feeling like, wow, this is like I'm finally becoming a part of like my family. My dad was finally kind of taking me in for who I was, and it was the best popcorn ever. And the movie was absolutely smashing. I just fell in love with it and have been a fan ever since. And I basically started sneaking marijuana and pills from his cabinet. He was a dealer for the most part, and he went in and out of prison. And depending on where he was, would depend on where we lived.
Mhm.
Um, I remember going into his closet, and he had this big cabinet, and he had all these bags of pills, and I would just take a few different colors and go
Back in the
out. And
days with the
back in the
colored
days,
pills
oh
and
yeah,
yellow
yeah,
jackets, black
yeah. If they're
hoodies,
if they were
better
white
pills.
cross tops,
Yeah.
I'd be getting a lot done.
Yeah.
If
Yes, that's where I started with the double cross.
Absolutely, and if they were red, I'd be down for a while, right?
Yeah.
So I think I was learning to be a Doctor Feelgood at that
Mm,
time, learning to live through higher chemistry, if you will,
mhm.
early on. But I didn't associate well with other humans or other kids. I really had a difficult time navigating through schools, and I was really introverted. I liked animals and inanimate objects. Humans, not so much, and still can sometimes be that way. Um, but anyways, yeah. Fast forward, I started
Well,
getting
wait. How many siblings do you have, and where's
Oh,
your place in that pecking order of the
my
family?
sister. I have an older sister. She was really good. She stayed at home a lot and got stuck with all the chores. My dad later would tell me that he tried to protect me from the chicanery that was going on in the house. He would
Mm,
say, Mike, go outside, go outside. Little did he know what I was discovering outside was just as damaging as what my sister was witnessing inside. Happy to say my sister has 12 years sober now
Oh,
and is an
amazing.
amazing woman and kind of a hero of mine in a sense.
That's
So,
amazing.
yeah.
So, and what about your mother in this one? Tell me more about your mother, Mike.
My mother, was, if my father was put away, my mother uh, did a lot to keep her addiction going,
Hmm.
including selling herself. I wrote a song one time called "My Mother is an Angel Who Lives Inside a Whore." Her feet
Oh,
they'd ache with calluses, and her soul would hurt no more. And I often talk about the best thing my mother ever did to me was sing me "Amazing Grace" before she went to bed. And she would come into my room and sing "Amazing Grace" to me, and I would tell her, "Hey, go wipe that makeup off your face." And it was a kind of a love hate relationship. And
so she was an active addict too.
She was an active
Yeah.
addict
Married
and
to an
married
addict.
to an addict, kind of a Sid and Nancy scene, really,
Mm,
really
of course,
violent
all of
and
that that goes along with it.
dangerous. If my dad was in prison and a stranger was in the house giving my mom a hard time, I was somewhat surgical with the shotgun. So
Mm.
I would come downstairs, and luckily I never had to use it, but I would definitely take control of the situation. And we'd cry together that night, and she'd sing me "Amazing Grace." And sometimes when things are difficult, I still hear that song before I go to bed, and I certainly am glad that I once was lost and now I'm found. The other thing about that is that later on in my story, after getting sober, my father killed himself,
Oh,
and they
wow.
did a suicide pact. My dad was successful, my mom was not. And she ended up going away and becoming a Jehovah Witness, out of all things.
Wow.
And I remember calling her for the first time. I was living at a place called the Third Step House, and
Oh, yeah.
I finally had found my mother, and that's a miracle story in and of itself. And I was like, "Mom, how are you? What happened to you?" Because our whole family dissipated after that incident, and we all ended up on the street and went our separate ways. And
Wow.
anyways, she says, "Oh, Mike, thy will be done. 180,000 are already selected." And I didn't know what she was talking about,
Hmm.
but I was just glad she was being alive. Later on, I'd see Jehovah Witnesses walking down the street, and I was thinking, wow, my mother was good at walking the street and approaching others.
And still was building her higher self that whole time.
Little did I know
Yeah, that
she
was
was
she.
being trained to be in her chosen belief and faith, and
There's a mind
and she
blower.
was really, really good at it, and she died a couple years ago,
Oh,
and
wow.
she died sober, and
Amazing.
and very proud of her. So she's been a instrumental part in me being a loving, compassionate, heartfelt person. Yeah.
Wow. That's that was a whew, whole bunch of information and story that can go on forever, I'm sure, on those just individually, let alone in
Absolutely.
an hour-long podcast. So this is gonna be amazing stuff right here, I can tell.
It,
So your older sister, you just have one sibling, right?
yeah, we're what's left. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's amazing though. I mean, that's what great insight. That's one of the reasons why I wanted you on the podcast. We can flip the most degrading, low bottom situation and then flip it around later and then see where that was turned into a positive situation. From
Absolutely.
go from streetwalker and then turn into a street walking Jehovah Witness spreading the word and to becoming a better. What insight is that? That's
Yeah,
amazing
it's pretty
story.
amazing.
So so you were having trouble. Did you graduate high school? I mean, how difficult was school for you with that kind of thing? And then your father going to prison and you holding down the house and having to put money on the books and holding together and all that whole situation must have been a lot of
Um,
situations and stuff.
yeah, I mean, I got a GED. I
Mhm.
On my last year of high school, I remember going into my senior year and needing to really deliver on this oral report for to pass, have a whole year of English completed for that year so I could graduate and go to the prom or whatever. And I was so drunk This teacher, Mrs. Leonard, uh, shout out to Mrs. Leonard, she gave me a hard time and when we started an argument, and the argument was over whether it was King Henry the Seventh or King Henry the Eighth. Um,
Well,
Needless to say, I stormed out of the room and ended up failing that oral report. And so I got a GED. I was arrested for strong-armed robbery right around that time, and this was right during the beginning of the Gulf War, or just pre-Gulf War. There was a
Mhm.
lot of conflict going on, and after getting arrested, I talked to a recruiter who told me that if I said I was already signed up by the time I was 18, he would get me out of the disposition and I would be able to go to the military. So that's what I did.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the military, wow, let's hear about that transition. You go from a fully drugged out house,
Hmm.
father selling drugs, mother's doing what she can to survive, and you get an out
I get an out. I
to
get a
go to
free
the
start.
military, which we know is a very heavily accumulated drinking area arena for
Absolutely.
people that haven't started drinking that can go into professional drinking within the first year of the military. Not dogging the military or anything. My
Yeah.
brother's retired military and he did the same kind of thing also. Um, with his story, I'll leave out, but he joined the military at 18 too. So let's hear about this transition. So he kind of fudged the paperwork a little bit, backdated it, and
Yeah.
then straight said, "Oh, you were already committed," and
That's
then
right.
put it through.
Yep.
Mike G joins the military.
Yeah. I mean, that case was dismissed, and I ended up going to Fort Benning, Georgia, when I went through
Wow.
basic training. Unfortunately, I still credit the movie Cool Hand Luke as I credit that for having all the problems I had in the military, because I had this mentality that they couldn't beat me, that they couldn't break my will,
Mm.
that they weren't going to do anything to, uh, program me, if you will. Um,
And this was spurred on. Well, how much time were they alluding for you to do for this strong arm robbery?
I believe that there were a couple people involved that ended
Mhm.
up doing a couple years, so it would have
Okay.
been a start of, a criminal kind of history, which I
Right.
don't have. So
That's
I
amazing.
really kind of evaded what could have been put me into a cycle that would be difficult
Most
to
definitely.
overcome. But anyways, so yeah, so I got stationed in Mannheim, Germany. It's funny with the
Oh,
military;
yes.
they're training you to go to the desert in Germany, right? Which
Yeah.
I drove a Bradley, an infantry fighting vehicle. I never had a license before I got to the military. In fact, that's why they picked me to drive for the platoon sergeant. They were like, "Hey, who here doesn't have a license?" And I raised my hand, and they were like, "You're my driver." And they had a mentality that if you didn't think you knew what you were doing,
Right.
for example, shooting a weapon or
Mhm.
driving a tank or whatever, the less experience you have, the more of
The
a
more
fighting chance,
trainable
the
you
more
can be.
teachable you
Yeah.
were. Yeah, absolutely. And they kind of broke me down right away. And
You weren't gonna break me down, it went
yeah,
right away.
I mean, and then I started drinking. I mean, I was a role
Mm.
model soldier when I was doing my military duties, physical training, and working on tanks, etc. But the reality is, like, as soon as you let me off, I was on and cracking. And once I took alcohol, I kind of blacked out and didn't know what was. I call it time travel now, but I would time travel until the next morning, and then just wake up with a whole bunch of, consequences, and started experiencing difficulty in the army, put on extra duty a lot, restriction to barracks, reduction in rank. And that is where I developed a really strong work ethic, though,
Mhm.
because I did my regular duty station, then I had extra duty, and
And you were
then
in Germany, which is a heavy drinking country.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's really where you learn to drink, to be,
Yeah, my brother was stationed there for 8 years.
yeah. And when we went to Saudi Arabia, I went to Saudi Arabia for 6 months. Um, I want to say that's the best I ever had it. It was
Okay.
there wasn't any drugs or alcohol available.
Whoa.
I basically had to do my job,
That's like a
and
dry country, right?
kind of a dry country, yeah, like a. And I don't know outside of the military, but I think the closest we had was near beer at the PX or something like that, and but there was nothing around. So,
Mm.
I really that was the first time I had experience not being under the influence since I was a conscious adult, and I would sit on the Bradley, and the oil wells were burning, so there was a diagonal line across the
Okay,
sky.
so this is right there in the Saudi during the Kuwait
Yeah, absolutely.
situation and
Yeah, yeah.
Operation.
I was in Kuwait, yeah. And so
Wow, what a
there's a
flipping
diagonal line of these fire and the smoke, and so the sunsets
yes,
would be absolutely amazing. It would seem like you were on a different planet.
right.
And I would sit there with my good friend who was a Navajo Indian, and he would smoke these tobacco like rolled joints, and
Hmm.
they didn't have an effect, obviously, but he would sing Indian war chants, which was pretty cool. He'd be like,
Wow.
"Ushtaya naya," and I would kind of zen out with him, and it was my
Uh,
first time being like sober
Kind of feeling the
inadvertently.
real Mike, huh?
Yeah, yeah. So that was a good time. Yeah.
So the first 6 months in that, so you did 4 years in the military. You didn't re-enlist, or
No,
how did that
I
happen?
I actually went for a year and a half. I was in Mannheim, Germany.
Uh huh.
For 6 months, I went to Kuwait during the conflict and cleanup, really. When I got back, I had all this money saved because they pay you really good when you're not able to spend any money. You're
Right,
getting
right.
hazard pay. You're making a killing, really. You're just
Uh,
banking it all. Everything's provided for you. I got out. I did Christmas in Switzerland and New Year's in
wow.
Paris, and I was drinking and smoking hash like nobody's business until I got popped for a piss test and got into an altercation with a few folks, and it was decided that I would receive a general discharge
Mm.
under honorable conditions, but still wasn't able to complete my tour, so I had to go. And I ran back to mom and dad and all that whole
Yeah, let's hear about
scene.
the transition back to there. You got some discipline in your life,
Yeah,
holding it together. Thank God for the military. You didn't
hurt
further
anybody.
your criminal, nefarious activities with the other brothers and everything like that, planning and plotting in prison, because we know
Absolutely.
that's not the most conducive area for getting the better self. So it seems like the military really was a bridging point, maybe a little bit, to saving you. Yeah.
In a lot of ways, it definitely postponed the inevitable, I guess.
Hmm.
As you know, as addiction can be very progressive, obviously.
Absolutely.
And it was progressing during that time, but I was developing some pride in my work and, relationships with other humans and developing some skills in the military. But when I got out, I was pretty defeated. I out processed in New Jersey. They give you like gate money or all your money for that you saved up, and, I mean, I think I went to a strip club, ran into some crack cocaine, and ended up blowing everything for, like, 4 days, and then took a bus
Wow.
all the way back from New Jersey to Orange
Woo.
County, right? Totally defeated. I mean,
Right.
just like, "I'm going back to mom and dad."
A man alone with his thoughts on the
Yeah,
bus,
just
and
not a good place, man, not a good
you knew
place.
what you were going back to.
Yeah, and that was an accurate assessment. That's exactly what I went back to. That they were living kind of lowly in motels, etc. I got two jobs right away: 7 to 3:30 in the afternoon, and 7 at night to 3:30
So
in the
you had
morning.
kind of a good resume too. It was an honorable
And
discharge.
I was, I mean, I was a hard worker, so I
Right.
had that going for me. Just take a hard worker and then give them a little meth.
Mm, yeah, I know, right?
And boy, the tables turn quickly, right? So I could work more with less food and less needs and less desire to
So
like.
what was your go-to drug?
That became my go-to drug right
Okay.
there. Somebody said, "Do you like to party?" And I had experience with cocaine and crack, etc. I remember, taking meth for the first time and being like, "Wow, this is it. This
Same
is
here.
definitely it. This is my go-to."
And how old were you at that point?
At that point, I was about 23.
Okay.
Um, I ran into trouble relatively quickly. I came into the meth scene, if you will, already broken. So I think that it took its toll on me really, really quick. I was
Mhm.
super addicted and addictive. So I started doing meth. I started doing it daily right away
Mhm.
and ran it to the ground within 2 years. I think I was in college hospital, hearing voices, super,
Mm. Right
psyched
here in
up.
good old OC, right?
Yeah, just totally wasted in Costa Mesa College Hospital, where I first got introduced to the program.
And what year was that? Do you
That
remember?
was in 1997.
Okay.
So 1997 was my first sobriety date. I stayed sober through for 10 years. Um,
Amazing.
I used this terminology. I mean, no offense to anyone, but I got sober a couple different ways. One was through what I call mainstream AAA,
Uh-huh.
which was very frothy and emotional and like, oh, we're gonna love you till you love yourself, and that
Mhm.
really hit home with me at that time. Later, after relapsing after 10 years, I'd be introduced to a whole different brand of
Yeah.
recovery, which was more like, "Where's your keys, bro?
Yeah.
How come you're not staying with your family? How come your curfew is later than a 13-year-old girl's?
Yeah.
When's the last time you bought your toiletries?" I got hit with like that kind of like strong armed truth about my condition before I was in a delusion at that point.
Right. So the 10 years, let's
Mhm.
so you worked all 12 steps
Yep.
in that 10 years,
Yep.
you got through the frothy emotional peel
Yeah.
kind of sobriety. What about what was that decade like? I mean,
That was an amazing decade. I mean,
so we're
God,
talking 97 to
97 to
2007.
2007. Yep.
Mhm.
Within that time, I actually was the first person in my family to buy a home.
Amazing.
I ended up getting married to a woman in recovery. I stayed married for 7 years. I was loving life and super engaged with the program. And my wife, who had a few years more sober than me, went through something called a gastric bypass at the time.
Right.
And she lost all this weight and started going out. And I was
Mhm.
super, super trusting. And basically, she changed as a human and fell in love with another human.
Mhm.
We shook hands and started to move our own direction. And ugh, the subtle insanity that preceded the first drink started to creep its ugly head in. I started feeling like, life was against me. I worked the steps backwards, meaning I stopped helping others. Then eventually I stopped meditating. Then eventually I stopped taking my own inventory.
Mhm.
Then I started building up resentments. Then I started having secrets. I fell in love with massage parlors. That was my
Mhm. And then
secondary
you
addiction.
started taking other people's inventory more than your own.
Yes, yeah. I fell in love with massage parlors,
Mhm.
right? I joke around saying my 3 favorite words at that time were "please turn over." And when I would be like, "Oh, wow, look at that. What are we supposed to do with that?" And I was listening to Tom Likas.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know
Oh,
if you're
yeah.
I don't
People
remember
don't know
that
about
guy.
Tom
All
Likas, my
right,
children out there.
so I started to pick up this, like, addiction, this, very dangerous addiction, and I was still working the program and helping people and this and that, but I had this, like, little side gig of getting massages and, going from 2 hands to 4 hands,
Mhm.
wanting more and it getting deeper and darker, and, because of all the time I had spent on the street, when I was younger, I had experienced, a lot of attention from males and females. So I think like at that point, I wanted one female hand and one male hand, right?
Mm.
I started like my appetite for wanting more. And I think a lot of that had to do with like the chase and the risk and like doing something wrong and like getting away with it kind of
You
thing.
started getting addicted to different
I
behaviors in
started
certain
getting
ways,
super
which is
addicted.
like bridging the gap to back to your drug of choice.
Yeah, and this is where I ran into I ended up relapsing. I was doing a grand opening for a department store in Bell Gardens, California, and I remember I was suffering severely from alcoholism. I was listening to the Gladiator soundtrack on the way to work. It
Uh-huh.
started to get really, really dark,
Uh-huh.
and I started like relying on my own thoughts, spending a lot of time in my mind. And this one dude that was like at the grand opening said, "Hey, I was drinking a lot of Red Bulls, and we're doing a mass hire and this and that." And they're like, "Have you ever tried Red Bull and vodka?"
Ooh,
And I remember something going off in my head, and I was like, "Oh man, that sounds
that's
good."
a little bit high, a little bit of
And I
low
was
in the
drinking
same
a Red
drink.
Bull, I was
Yeah.
almost imagining the sting that would go down with it and how anesthetic, how anesthesia-like it would feel, and it would just kill all this uncomfortability, the ease and comfort that comes with the first drink. Then I stopped by a liquor store one morning, and I saw next to the cash register one of those like little baskets with those little airplane bottles of
Mm,
vodka. And I remember
how
looking at it.
convenient.
I had just got 10 years sober. I was making a killing. I had met my new love of my life. And I remember looking at this airplane bottle, shaking it, saying, "What could this do to me? What could, I mean, come on, look at that." And I took a drink of that airplane bottle of vodka. And it was the first time I ever uh, drink and drive. It was the first time I ever drove drunk. And
Wow.
as soon as I drank that airplane bottle of vodka, my first thought was like, a half pint.
Yeah,
And
of
so,
course.
of course, yeah. So I go in, I get a half pint. Now I'm drinking every day. I'm finally up to a fifth. This is 6 months period. I'm drinking like religiously. Just glad I'm not doing anything illegal in my mind, even though I'm drinking and driving. And I run into my favorite friend, the meth monster, who
Of
is just
course.
waiting in the background and is like, "Hey, do you party?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "With what?" And it was a contractor, a male, and he said, I with meth." And I was like, "Oh yeah." And this is where the story I think takes a really dark turn. I turned my will and my life over the care of that gentleman. Started using daily. Landed myself under a tree at Miles Square Park. Super messed up. Um, Separated from my family, unemployable, hearing voices, full blown AIDS, and and praying for my new mother of my child, that she may find a decent man to take care of the kids the way that I couldn't. I started praying that God would take me. And I looked across the street over there. This is the Fountain Valley Alano Club.
Mhm,
And
yeah,
I
yep,
see
right,
all
Miles
those
Square.
weird AA people in front of
Uh-huh.
the club, like a little beehive,
Mhm.
just racing around. But they had what I wanted, which was a smoke. So I saw them over there. I walked over there. They asked me those same questions that everybody asks everyone. "How's it going out there? Is it working for you?" Started giving me a hard time.
Mhm.
And I was really dumb and through with my life at that point. And I
So you
started
so
saying,
you
"Okay."
had so you had a daughter, or how many daughters do you have?
Yeah, on the tail end of,
Let's just rewind a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah.
So in that first 10 years with your first wife of 7 years,
Yep.
did you have a child with her?
No, after
So it was the next
it was
the relationship
about
after
year
that.
9.
Okay.
I was addicted to massage parlors. I'd
Mhm.
gone through the divorce, and I was just kind of a pig, if you will,
Mhm.
with women and men, to be transparent. And I ran into a beautiful woman. She was a Latina. She had a lot of
Mhm.
fight in her.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
right.
it was like love at first sight, right?
Uh-huh.
And I hooked up with her. 9 days after meeting her, she got pregnant.
Okay.
And she's still a really good friend of mine, and I still have a lot of love and respect for her. She is the
Okay.
mother of both my children.
Oh, amazing.
But that was my first daughter. I would find out within 6 months later that I had HIV. So
Wow.
by the grace of God, and if I didn't have children, I'm not sure I would have made it through that time.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So we're going to get back into more of that coming up in your second stint of sobriety.
Yeah.
So we're going to go into a video here. If we can pop that up, Solomon, do you have any like quick comments or anything so far at this point, halfway through the podcast?
Yeah, Mike, your story is riveting. I think, of all the podcasts we've done, we've rarely had someone go into so much detail as to the ups and downs of your life. And I think it's just so representative of the real struggle people go through. And I love the fact that, you're sharing this with us so people can really see that it's not all bad and it's not all great,
Mhm.
that there is real life to it. And there are, it's not all like fairy tale stories of, this went down, this happened, I can blame this or that. And then, I did something and now I turned my life around and now it's all great. There is pain. There's a path to that. And so we appreciate your, just being very, very graphic and detailed about it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, if we can, we'll just go to Mike doing some video at a comedy place and
Okay, here we go.
an event.
alcohol, fentanyl. Between you, me, and the good Lord, I wanted it all. I wanted it all. Once there was a way to get back homeward. Once there was a way to get back home. Ooh, sweet darling, do not cry. And I will sing a lullaby. Oh, I've been neglected, been abused, wore duct tape on my shoes on the first day of school. Remember welfare cheese and powdered milk, crunchy carpets. Remember going to church and getting saved for a free meal. Or speaking in tongues for some canned food. Stood in line for Toys for Tots. I've gotten grounded for pinching Pop's pot. Testified in court when I was only 14, same year I had my first hooker for a bag of grain. My mentally ill sister sometimes seemed the only one sane. Man, when she was manic, I'd put on those big old headphones and just listen to Purple Haze or Purple Rain, Purple Rain. Narcotic raids and frequent traffic stops. For a while, I believe Pops worked with cops. When I was 18, I signed up to go to the Gulf War. And I'd never had it so good before. I'd already seen Mom and Dad both behind glass. Now I'm driving a tank in the desert. This kicks ass. Gave me a medal, then kicked me out for being drunk, so I ran back to Mom and Dad and all that junk. At the end, we all hustled, either harbor or beach. Street, that is. Not like ones you might find on retreats. Gave a kid up for adoption before I was 21. Same year, I was in a mental hospital for 5 straight months, and after an 8-day drug-induced coma and slitting my wrist, I roamed through motel parking lots late nights looking for sis. And to top it all off, I found out I had AIDS. I have 2 baby girls, thank God they're okay. Dad killed himself and left Mom and sis on the street. But I pulled through. There's something special inside me. It's in my chest. It beats like a drum. It roars like a lion and overcomes. It wakes me up. It won't give up. It's been broken lots of times. But it still wants to love. It inspires me, fires me up to be a man, says shit to me like, I think I can. I think I can. Now my mind is mangled, there is no doubt. But inside, it screams, it strives, it shouts. Shh. Shh. Listen, because you got one too. Oh, it loves others, but it's loyal to you. And this thing writes great songs. It rights all wrongs, ends wars and fights to be free, and still gives a buck to a drunk on the street. And if a terrorist attack and our brothers are in trouble, this thing puts on its gloves and digs through the rubble and still stays humble. If a hurricane comes, this thing feels and it feels until it fills and heals and rebuilds behind every Botox-filled, beauty-baked queen's big fake breast beats one of these. Every slave, every soldier, and every single mom. The beating of a drum just pushing out blood and pushing out love. Because for once, there's a way. So to all of our afflictions and addictions and derelictions, our obsessions, depression, and traits of oppression, to the ones who want me and need me and taunts me and teases me, I've shed a river. We've shed a river, bled ourselves dry, bought all their shame and bought all their lies. They poked and they prodded, we bowed and we nodded. Enslaved and enchained when we sold him psychotic to the buckets of fuckets and cases of baskets. Hopes, dreams, and unsung heroes all buried in caskets. To all of my haves, haven't hads, and many have-nots, would-haves, could-haves, and should-haves I got. Where'd I get the strength to rise? I'll give you a clue. It's way up high. Oh yeah, and it's real down low. And it's all around. Lost 1,000 times, and 1,001 I's found. 'Cause once there's a way. Thank God for A.
Did you guys catch all that?
All right, that was pretty amazing. Well spoken and well said. Follow along with that one. Go back in the podcast, check that out. Maybe you'll send me the link and I can put that in the show notes also at the bottom so you can listen to that again. Super powerful. Amazing stuff. We'll give them another shout out, and another standing O here at the podcast place, and amazing stuff. Let's get right back into where you were for after your first decade. You found yourself getting back into sobriety, and I think this is alluding to your second stint of, what was it, 9 years?
Yep.
So you were there at the Fountain Valley Alano Club. They started asking you some soul punching questions, and let's do a quick little 5 minutes on that journey, and then we'll get to where we're going, where we're at now too.
Yeah, I like I said, I was in Miles Square Park under a tree, and ended up getting involved in AA and going to see what they had, which I already kind of knew the answer, but felt I was one of my favorite words in the big book is seemingly. It was seemingly hopeless at that point, and I ran into a guy that asked me if I wanted to go to where he was at, and I was so desperate, I basically said yes. And I didn't ask if they had a flat screen TV. I didn't ask if they had Wi-Fi or what the food chart was. He told me that they were going to feed me hot dogs, endless potatoes, and top ramen, and that they were going to feed me just well enough to try and help another alcoholic. And that was my purpose in life, and that I was to take my stuff to a place in Anaheim called the Third Step House. It was one of the low bottom indigent recovery homes. At that point, there were three of them: the Book House, the Recovery House, and the Third Step House. And I ran into a good friend of mine that would later become a hero, who has since passed. A good friend of mine, Johnny O, who told me, put down your shit, and we're going to detox. And I remember thinking, good, I could use a few more days. And he was like, no, man, you're going to help someone else. And you can't transmit that which you haven't got. So I only had HIV and real bad alcoholism. I didn't think I had any purpose at that point. And he said, well, you can listen to somebody, you can read the big book with somebody, you can roll them cigarettes, you can just hang out with them and hear their story and tell them your story. And he showed me immediately that the only solution to my problem, as I was dying from a disease and didn't know it, was in full flight from reality, had given up on God, the universe, and myself at that point, and slowly resuscitated my soul through the 12 steps. But at that house, they weren't messing around. They told me we can do Alcoholics Anonymous there, or we could not do it somewhere else. They told me that I was to put my big book by my pillow. I told them, they asked me what my problem was. I told them I had HIV. They said, that's fine. Read pages 60 to 63. And then I was like, what does that have to do with what's going on? I need to take care of my children. They said, you want to take care of your children? Read pages 84 to 89.
That's right.
Start memorizing the 3rd and 7th step prayer. Start carrying the mantra of thy will be done, thy will not, mine be done, and try not to think at all. In fact, just carry that thought with you all day long. And what's funny about that is like a year later, I was like, I could have been saying anything. I could have been saying Betty bought some butter, but she said this butter's bitter. If you put in my batter, it'll make my batter bitter. But if I buy a bit of better butter and put in my bitter batter, it'll make my bitter batter better. Even that would have been better than listening to my head at that time. My
Yeah.
GPS was taking me to the darkness. It did not want me to recover. So I started carrying the mantra as it was outlined in the big book. And I mean, they were really not nice about Alcoholics Anonymous. They were like, "Hey, go out to the yard and pick up some dog shit." And I was like, what does that have to do with being sober? And they would say, "Oh, well, because tomorrow you're going on job search, you need 2 forms of ID." So there was kind of a comedy, it reminded me of
Yeah.
basic training actually a lot, where they were like really kind of tearing you down right from the get-go. When I said I need to take care of my kids, I remember a guy ran to the kitchen, he came back and he goes, "Oh, you want to take care of your kids? That's great. Let's start with this cup."
Yeah.
And I was like, "What do you mean?" "Let's see if you can take care of this cup." And I was like, "Well, that's ridiculous." And I remember like a half hour later, I was like, "What'd I do with that cup?" So I was, beyond human aid. I say that a lot because I do believe that nothing on this planet can keep me sober. Nothing on the only rolling rock that sustains life can keep me sober. I needed something greater than not only alcoholism and addiction. I needed something greater than my love for my children, which was the strongest power on the planet I was aware of. I would do anything for my kids. I would jump out the window. I would fight, 100 people, hand-to-hand combat for my children. But the one thing I couldn't do with all my heart, all my mind, all my soul, everything I have in me, I couldn't do that. I couldn't stay sober. So
Mm.
these guys were a different brand. They submerged me in Alcoholics Anonymous 100% of the time, from the minute I woke up to the time I went to bed. A lot of panels. I became the manager of that house I stayed there 27 months, ended up staying 9 years sober, and ended up going out one last time.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that in that 9 years, you became back uh, a father to your two daughters, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And things got better, and you moved out of there.
Things
And
got better. I moved out. I never reconciled with the mother of my children, and
Mhm.
but we're, like I said, good friends, and
That's
she's an
amazing.
amazing woman, and has battled with alcoholism, off and on. But she doesn't do what I do when I get drunk, right? She'll be like, "Yeah,
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I was a wreck last night," and I'll be
yeah,
like, "That's it,"
yeah. That's
you
that's
know.
what you call a wreck.
Yeah, but I mean, to each their own.
Exactly.
I'm sure that's
We're not judging that
their own
process.
hell in their
Hmm.
own right. And so, yeah, I mean, I went out of the third step house, moved out, got an apartment. Same story as you hear from a lot of people, which is like, get in the program. Let your AA life let the life that AA gave you take you away from your AA life, right?
Hmm.
Life gets really big, program gets real
Yes.
small. I had
Uh-huh.
experience with that. I could tell the subtle insanity was starting to creep in. I started relying on my own thoughts instead of running it by other humans.
The same
And
kind of progression at the first decade.
yeah, and the other thing I would say is that, something I haven't touched that much on is that I've had a lot of ins and outs with different, what you would call, mental illness. And
Hmm.
I think I did the best I could in the program without any, medication or anything like that. I'm not on medication now, but I have no opinion about that. The reality is that I was going through a pretty gnarly depression,
Hmm.
and totally sober. I knew somebody, and how I would know them is beyond me. But I said, "Oh, is it true that fentanyl is killing everyone?" And I remember this person saying, "Yes, that's accurate." And I told him, "I'll take 25." And I was really depressed, and I don't really, looking back on it, I can't see how I worked myself into that debacle mentally. Um, I was active, but not as active. I was definitely a workaholic, and wasn't, tending to my own inventory, if you will, very often. So there's a lot of things I could see that were the cause, but to take that kind of erratic action was a little bit of a concern, right? Obviously. I called that person, took 25 pills, and woke up 8 days later in a coma, half paralyzed, with
Wow.
AA's finest sitting at my legs, right? This guy, Richard M., who's was Johnny O's sponsor,
Wow.
was sitting there. He's an atheist, which I think's funny. We still argue to this day because I swear I saw him praying. The reality is, he had his hand on my legs, and I came out of this coma, and I had really done a number on myself, and that was in early October of last year.
Mhm.
I mean, of 2022. And I still feel like I'm coming out of that fog and working really, really hard in recovery to try and find a new way of living, which I found in obviously the 12 steps, a loving God who pulled me out of that insanity one last time, and I really appreciate um, my loving higher power who you know I really kind of like took it for a everyone was surprised around me. It wasn't like, oh, he's doing bad, and then it ended up I was actually doing fairly decent,
Mhm.
and for whatever reason, got a wild hair up my butt to um, take my own life. And I can't explain that other than I think my dad killed himself, and hereditarily, it just seems like I had this propensity to want to end life tragically, if that makes sense. And it had been calling me for a long time, and I finally scratched that itch, and I'm glad it didn't work out.
Yeah, so are we.
Yeah.
And I'm super glad that you came on the podcast and sharing that. This is a super important aspect that we wanted to touch upon of recovery, of being able to come back after longer term sobriety. Because what I've noticed, the longer you have sober and you go out, the harder it is to come back.
Super difficult.
Super difficult. And
Actually, the time I've had sober, when I came back this time, was serving me as a liability, not an asset. It
mm,
was not an asset that I had experience in mainstream AA and experience in this like hardcore, low bottom recovery. My recovery these days is somewhere in between. Coincidentally, I didn't realize I was being trained to help others in both categories, which
right.
I'm really glad to say that I have one sponsee that's like mainstream kind of guy, and I could just pull out a nice little motto or a nice little
Yeah.
saying, and give him a little bit of direction, and
Uh,
he like rides that for the whole week, and I'm practicing what you told me, and
yeah.
it's pretty amazing. And then I got another guy, it's not quite like that, obviously,
A little rougher around the
little rough
edges.
around the
Needs a little
edges.
bit more soul punching.
Yeah, definitely want him to follow the direction verbatim.
Right. Well, that's awesome
Yeah,
stuff right there.
thanks.
And so let's go a little bit into the comedy situation and
Mhm.
stuff. So how long have you been doing comedy and kind of branching out in that area?
Well, I think the last couple years, obviously Johnny
Mm-hmm.
F brought me in and had me do a couple shows at the Garden Grove Alano Club, and
Mm-hmm.
I started doing open mic. And my direction now is to come to the Laugh Factory and kind of give them a hard time. I really love laughter and love making people laugh.
Right.
I feel like it's really dangerous to the disease, and definitely dangerous to like depression, and
Mm-hmm.
definitely wakes people up. You also can say things that like if you were to say normally, that might not be that great. And because of my experience and kind of dark past, I like the humor that comes along with telling stories, right? Because I think everyone
Mm-hmm.
has a story, and it could either be a gnarly story in vain, or it can be a wonderful story to try and use that story to benefit other humans. So I'm glad to use mine for the benefit of the good.
Yeah, that's amazing stuff. And wow, what a journey in the whole process of getting sober, relapsing, getting sober, relapsing, and now working on year two.
Yeah.
And the humbleness that comes along with it. It's like when I hear you share and do things, it's not always of a process of you recounting how long you've had sober. When you told me that you had 2 years at this time, I thought in my mind, you know what I mean? In my mind, right?
Yeah.
And that you had longer, but I already knew that you had way more than 2 years. But people these days are just really crushing it. I mean, I hear people sharing these days and engulfed with the program and practicing it, and you hear them share, and it's like if you were to guess how long they had sober, you'd be like, oh yeah, 10 years, 15, and they're on like year three.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something going on that's like super magical that I see, and that's also coming in from people like you of all that ability to be able to take all that past and then be able to dole it out in certain ways. And
Yeah.
that kind of just takes me back to the insight that you had about your mother
Yeah.
and being able to that this program and God can just turn the most crazy stories into the most beautiful outcomes.
Yeah. I mean,
It's just
I don't want
unbelievable.
to say the darker the berry, the sweeter the juice.
Yeah.
But this is a good place to be the least likely to succeed. I believe like the more
Mhm.
desperate and more darker you are, the closer in connection to a higher power you'll have to be in order to, get out of that. So I'm really, really, I consider the program a miracle factory wholeheartedly. I walk in there, it's a miracle. Anybody there, their natural state is usually drunk or loaded. Most people are drunk and loaded that are alcoholics and addicts today. Most of them are drunk and loaded. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
So you run into the program where there's some people, attempting or failing or attempting to get sober. That's
working
still
on
the
it.
smallest portion of the alcoholic and addicted community.
Right.
It's not the majority of people are sober. It's not the majority of people are getting sober. It really is. There is a vast legion of alcoholics and addicts that are suffering today. And there's a unique group that seems to be haunted, or I like to think that God's stalking me, but God seemed to have been stalking me all along and trying to reach me. And yeah, I mean, Alcoholics Anonymous is a different wrench, has a different wrench for every nut. I say that all the time.
Yes.
The reality is, my higher power speaks Chinese. He speaks Buddha. He speaks numbers. He speaks atheism. He speaks agnostic. He speaks Buddhist. He speaks Hindu. He speaks every language there is known to
Right.
man. He speaks numbers. He speaks astrology.
Yeah.
He works through a million different avenues to
Absolutely.
reach other human beings and bring them closer to him and his children. And I really respect that about Alcoholics Anonymous, that it keeps a safe playing field for anybody, because we're pulling people out of some really dark spaces. So,
Absolutely. What a vision, though. I got that vision of how dark, the deeper the darkness, how much closer and thinner the line is to the light.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, not to get biblical, but there is,
Let's get biblical. A little
there's,
bit.
it's like, I don't know about the 99.
Mhm.
God might be chasing the 99. Maybe he's all into the 99, but I know one thing. His biggest concern is with that lost one.
Right.
He chases that one, man. He has a relationship with that one that's heartfelt and sincere, and his focus is on the one.
Yeah.
And maybe the universal laws that govern our world, or principles, uh, God put those in motion, and most people can like navigate with that. But I was one of the lost ones, and uh, I think he took a special interest in me to pull me out of the depths. And I don't know that I earned that or deserve that or anything like that. I just know that I'm really grateful that a loving power is concerned with those that are least likely to succeed.
I love it. That's one of the awesome things I love about the program. I'm always rooting for the underdog.
Yeah.
Always rooting for the underdog. Will the Browns ever win the Super Bowl? Who
Yeah.
knows? But I'm rooting for them. I see all the people coming into the program. Wanted to also, since we're winding down here, I wanted to say a special heartfelt thanks for coming on and sharing and getting vulnerable with your story. We didn't get into the HIV AIDS
Uh-huh.
aspect of that, but maybe we'll come in and do some education with that.
Absolutely.
And before the podcast and stuff, when I was listening what was going on, it sounded like you were very knowledgeable of these kind of things, and could be a very unbelievable, helpful aspect to maybe come on and do some education about living with HIV and thriving with HIV instead of just surviving, which we see a lot of people doing these days.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to give a call out to action. Also, I wanted to give a big shout out on the sobriety dates. We had a brother, Dion S, take 3 years today. And if you want to do a shout outs on sobriety on the Super Sober podcast or whatever, we're going to do a call action. You can find us on f3recovery.org. You can go to the contacts page. You can email us there. You can email us at info@supersoberpodcast.org or info@f3recovery.org. We got 3 different emails going on. You can go to our webpage at f3recovery.org, all one word. You can go onto the resources page. That's an ongoing platform of different people, treatment centers, different people that have been on the podcast, everybody willing to help you have any questions for Mike G or any other participants of the Super Sober podcast, just reach out. If you, Jim Breon's, he's on there with his counseling and his platform, and Dr. Alan Resch, and there's just so much. And every podcast, it seems that we have someone else that's coming on and helping in the community. And we're gonna, if you want us to shout out your sobriety dates or whatever it is, go ahead and email us, and we'll do that. And there's every month there's just unbelievable stuff and people doing the transformation, and it's just awesome stuff going on out there. And we're just gonna keep on keeping on. Do you want to give a shout out to Notorious JID, our first mascot of recovery? And Notorious JID is jails, institutions, and death, the 3 outcomes of active addiction. Hanging out with the dragon today, out of the cage over here. And shout out to the Detox, the story of addiction, the deadliest disease that man has ever known. The one sheet is on f3recovery.org. That's a streaming series for anybody that might be interested in producing that in Hollywood. Shout out. If anybody knows anybody, this story's never been done. We all need something out there to go ahead and binge and watch as recovery stories, which hasn't been done, which is, mind blowing to me. But I have the whole series, the one sheet out there, the pilot episode, and a whole first season. If anybody wants to shout out and see if we can get that produced. And I want to thank a big last shout out here to Solomon at the podcast place, who makes all this happen.
Thank you,
And,
Solomon.
Yeah. And
Happy
thanks
to do
again,
it.
Mike G, for sharing your story, man, and getting
Appreciate
vulnerable with us. And what a gnarly story it was. And what a beautiful place we're at. And shout out to the awesome shirt he's wearing too. All right. So just wanted to say thanks again, and keep on keeping on.
Thank you for listening to the Super Sober Podcast. Go to our website at f3recovery.org. That's F3Recovery, all one word, .org. We're turning fight, flight, and freeze into free form and flowing through practicing the 12 steps and staying accountable to change. Don't forget to keep on keeping on.